Jets, Jets, and welcome back to another episode of the Jets Ward. I am your host, Ryan Ward, and I got an exciting one for you guys tonight. But before we get into that, if you have been here before, thank you guys so much for coming back. Always appreciate you guys here. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining us. Always love having new people in here, whether you are a Jets fan or not. You are always welcome in the Jets Ward. And tonight is a special one. Our first collab on the channel, and it's with somebody who is really, really cool. One of my good friends. It is FishBowl Fantasy Sports, aka Rich Fisher, and I'm so excited to have him on the channel to go over a first round mock draft. So, Rich, tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I just started, last year I started a new fantasy football page for fans. It's not just for seasoned vets, but, for the beginners as well. So check us out. But, this guy here, Ryan's been running a great channel on his own. So I'm glad to be on the Jets Ward podcast for once.
Appreciate you, man. And I hope we get to do this more often as well. So who is your favorite NFL team, if I don't mind asking? Let the fans know who you root for and how you feel your team did this past year.
Oh, the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, a lot to be desired, that's for sure. So, it's great to start off with the draft tonight, just to kind of go over some possibilities that they can move with. But, when you don't expect a lot, any little bit, can be kind of exciting for the team. So, take it 1 year at a time with them.
Well, going into the year, were you confident, or did you know having a new head coach coming in, it was going to be different? Did you have any faith in Will Levis or the defense or anything like that? Like, what were your feelings going into the season?
Kind of, to be honest, I think with the new regime that was kind of like molding itself, I really didn't expect too much. I thought that the schedule that we had was actually relatively weak, that I think that, we could have possibly had 9 games. I really think the collapse started week 1. Our team just did not try to push the ball down the field at the beginning of the season. Turnovers definitely was killing us with Levis at the beginning of the season. The coach liked to take a lot of accountability on his end, but it didn't look like the players really were trying to play for him as well. They kind of relied a lot on, do not make mistakes rather than trying to, put some points up on the board. And most of the games, if you saw the first drive of the games, we were scoring. I think we scored on 10 out of the 17 games that we played. The first drives we scored on. So we were jumping out the early leads on teams, but there was just after the what they say, the 15 plays are scripted, there was just no rhythm at all on the offensive side. Defensive side, kind of they say that it was like one of the top, I think it was number 1 defense ranked, I think, against yards. But again, a lot of that has to do with, giving up turnovers, and the opposing team don't have to travel far to score touchdowns. So I think a little bit to be desired. They couldn't create turnovers, which was a big thing. Again, the pass rush was not existent. So there's a whole lot for the Titans to have to uncover really going on to next year. So, am I a believer in Levis? No. I wasn't really a big fan of him coming out of college. I think if anything, he was going to be a 2 or 3 year prospect before really becoming like, an Alex Smith kind of game manager guy. I don't think them rushing them into, being the QB1 was the smartest thing. But when you have nobody else on the roster, it kind of had to be forced. So.
Do you feel like he was forced in? Because I know you guys had Tannehill for a little while, and Tannehill was doing good for you guys. Did you think you gave up on Tannehill too quick and rushed this kid in, or?
I know Tannehill, an issue with Tannehill and Levis too is because the O-line play has been so horrific that we were going to leave Tannehill out there to get crushed every week, and he was battling through injuries. So when we were at a position where I felt like they had to put in Levis to see if there was any kind of development over the offseason last year, I thought it was a good timing for it. Because again, now you got to, I don't know. It's kind of on both ways, because you could say that they put him in too early, because why are you going to risk putting the rookie in there with no offensive line protection? And then again, it's, we got to see what the guy has to see if he's going to be somebody even worth developing, because NFL doesn't like to wait on quarterbacks anymore. So, it's a little bit of both ends, but honestly, I thought it was the best decision, because at that time we were technically in playoff contention 2 years ago. So we figured, maybe like if he can make a run, we can make a run, but it's It just didn't happen to be that way, but I honestly think it was an all right decision for them.
Your team reminds me so much of the Jets starting out a quarterback way too long, man.
Luckily on my end, especially being in New York like you, luckily teams don't see my team to realize what's really going on. I mean, your team's so local that everyone's watching it, and they get the primetime hype for being a New York team. So luckily, like our one Thursday night game we get against the Jaguars, still nobody even watches that. So.
Well, it sucks too with the Jets is going from the Adam Gase eras where you brought up the script, the opening script. All the time it was really good, and after that it was just a disaster.
Yeah.
Then we go to the Robert Saleh regime where we have hope in everything. Draft Zach Wilson, shove him right in, and we all know what happens years later. Get Aaron Rodgers and win 5 games. So not a great story for the Jets, and that's why both of our teams at this point are picking where we are picking. Yeah. But I'm so excited for you to join me tonight. Guys, we are going to be doing a first-round mock draft, going over what we think can actually happen. So we are all sticking and picking. Maybe later down the road, we'll do some trades. But if every team were to stick and pick at their positions, that is where we are going to be focusing on in this draft. And Rich, you are going to have the first pick, and I will bring that up. And Rich, the Tennessee Titans are on the clock. Who are you picking?
I mean, my heart says you either go down 2 draft picks with the Giants, let them select their quarterback of need. I don't think the Titans are going to do that. If it's anything like the Titans like to do, it's usually the opposite of what I want. And that is going to be drafting Cam Ward. I mean, obviously he showed a lot of potential this year. He's a big statued guy. I think they are going to end up going with him because I just don't think that the coach itself has a belief in Will Levis. I think that I think they're going to ask too much to have that trade down scenario with, the Giants. And I don't think the Giants are really going to want to trade up too much or trade a lot to move up a couple spots. So I think I'm confident enough to say that the Titans are probably going to draft Cam Ward at number 1.
Okay, Cam Ward going with the first pick.
If I could have it my way, I would want them to draft either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but I honestly think that they're going to solidify the quarterback position this year.
Sounds good. So Cam Ward going number 1, which a lot of people feel will happen. So will it under the new Borgonzi vision? I honestly don't know. He's he is constantly saying he wants to trade, but that could be just rumors and trying to get people to try to trade up. But in all honesty, I would go with Abdul Carter myself for number 1 because I think you guys need a lot more pass rush like you were talking about before. Yep. But if you were to go quarterback, Cam Ward through all mock drafts is the number 1 quarterback. And it doesn't matter to us who we think is the number 1 quarterback. On a lot of scouts' boards, it is Cam Ward. And that gets us to the next pick with Cleveland. Now, we could go a lot of ways with this one in Cleveland. They could go quarterback as well. There are rumors of them loving Shedeur Sanders. But what I think ends up happening since Tennessee took Cam Ward, I honestly think they are going to run to the podium because Myles Garrett wants up out of Cleveland. They are going to need a new edge rusher, and Abdul Carter is the best player in this draft. So they will be excited to get this monster destroyed in Penn State. Was one of the best pass rushers in all of college football, the best one. And you could just see the skills that this kid has and showing that he is ready to terrorize quarterbacks in the NFL. Your thoughts on the Abdul Carter pick for Cleveland?
Oh yeah, definitely a no-brainer for them. It always amazes me too when a team will get rid of a elite pass rusher or elite offensive lineman and then immediately fill them in with that. it always makes me laugh with that. Like if you could just try to hold on one more year with Myles Garrett and have both of them at the same time just to see if there's anything that can be productive wise. But definitely no brainer for me as well. I'd definitely say Carter. And if you going back a little bit on what the Titans selection, if they had drafted Carter, if you look at the teams in the AFC, most of which have either a dominating offensive line or dominating defensive front. And I honestly think that is still where you build your rosters. It's the line of scrimmage. Again, getting in the quarterback is all great, but if you're not going to get the offensive line, you don't have anybody to protect them. Just ask Andrew Luck about that. So, I mean, if the Browns are going to, if they feel like they're going to be a couple years out from potential, runs again, obviously I think Carter will definitely be the guaranteed guy to go to with this pick.
Yeah, and Carter, I really, really feel like he is going to go to you guys. But if he does get past you, it's a no-brainer for Cleveland. That's where he will play, whether he likes it or not. But now we're moving to pick 3 with the New York Giants, and there is a lot of buzz around these guys. Here's your pick. Where do you think the New York Giants go?
I think Dion gets his way. Shedeur Sanders. Listen, if they even try to remotely go to a free agent pickup, like a Sam Darnold-esque guy, I don't think they're still making the right decision. They need a face of the franchise type player. I mean, they could obviously go Travis Hunter, but I don't think that the need is all there as much as it is for the quarterback position for them. So I think it's just a no-brainer at that point that they have to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft.
Yeah, we all know that's where Shedeur wants to go. They showed on the news and everything his Giants cleats, where he was going when the Giants had the number 1 overall pick and then lost it. We all know that Shedeur Sanders wants to be a Giant, and in this draft, how the board is fallen, he gets his wish. The Giants get who is looked at can be the number 1 quarterback in the draft, number 2. In my opinion, he's number 4. I have really weird quarterback standings. I have Jackson Dart as the number 1 quarterback, then Cam Ward, and then it's a fight between Shedeur Sanders and Kyle McCord as my quarterbacks. Yep. But on most scouts boards, Sanders would be the number 2. And I think he ends up in a good place with the Giants. They need to surround him with more weapons and some linemen, but overall, he's got something there.
Yep.
Do they start him right away? I don't think so. I don't think any quarterback in this draft should start right away, but we don't know. Daboll might think he's ready. And that gets us to pick number 4 and the New England Patriots. And at this point, New England might try to trade back, but in my opinion, they are looking at 2 big positions for them, receiver and cornerback. And with the board falling like it is, man, they get their wish on somebody who can play both positions. And as a Jets fan, I hate this because they get a stud, and that is Travis Hunter. I don't think there's any way New England would pass him up unless they got a boatload of picks. And if a team that was desperate for a quarterback was trying to trade up, but after Shedeur and Cam go, I don't think there's any team willing to trade up for any other quarterback. They'll just stay and pick. And New England gets their guy. They get a receiver if they want him to play receiver, or they get a stud cornerback, which I think would be his better position. But Travis Hunter goes to New England, and for the AFC East, I hate that.
Yep. I 100% agree with you. It's starting to look like the New England ways. They have a coach with a head on their shoulders, and he's going to look for playmakers. That's one thing that he always did, especially with the Titans when he was their coach there. Always look for playmakers.
I just don't want to have another like Bill Belichick type coach there who's going to dominate the division, because we don't know what's going on with the Bills now, because this might have been their last chance at a run for the Super Bowl, and we don't know what's going to happen with them. But man, it is, if Vrabel does a lot, he's already bringing back McDaniels as his offensive coordinator. And I'm really, really nervous when it comes to New England, because Drake May is proving that he can be a stud in this league, and he's pretty good. Let's see how he does next year. But providing Travis Hunter there, it's going to be so interesting to see what happens with them.
Yeah.
And now Jacksonville is on the clock. Who do you think Jacksonville ends up going with?
So it's going pretty chalk right now. I'm not going to step too far away from it, but I honestly think they traded Cam Robinson last year. They got to solidify the offensive line. They got to get Trevor Lawrence an offensive line to protect him. You got to go Will Campbell here.
Solid pick. I think he's the best lineman in the draft. He is a beast, can play left or right tackle. Solid pick. for Jacksonville, which Trevor Lawrence will love.
Yeah, say nothing else really on that end. I mean, he could have gone defensive tackle. I do like Mason Graham there. I even like Mikael Williams at that spot. I think I honestly think he is probably the second best overall defensive lineman in this draft. But yeah, I would definitely say got to get the offensive line there. I mean, they had pieces on their offense as well that are kind of making the right moves, and I think that working on that defensive line a little bit could definitely help them out. But continue to make sure that you're going to protect your franchise quarterback if they still really believe that he is, and that's Trevor Lawrence, of course.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence has had up and down years, and after he got that contract, that offensive line did him dirty last year. The amount of injuries that he had, and it doesn't help when Al Shire is trying to take your head off as well.
Yeah. Oh man,
that was rough to watch last year. Rough. And I like Trevor Lawrence, but man, it was not great for him last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us up to the 6th pick with the Las Vegas Raiders under a new regime. Tom Brady looks like he's calling a lot of shots there. They get Pete Carroll in as the new head coach, and I love Pete Carroll. I think he's going to do great things for the Raiders, but they need a lot of help when it comes to quarterback. Aiden O'Connell, I don't think is it. But if the board fell to them like this, I don't think the Raiders would be very happy. I think they'd do what they can to try to trade back.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are sticking and picking, another big need for them is wide receiver. And there is a stud right there on the board still. Somebody who Jets fans really, really wanted as well. But if this was how the board fell and Las Vegas stayed where they were, they're going to go Tet McMillan. That's the pick that I think would solidify that receiving core. They got Jacoby Myers, who's had breakout years the past couple of years, who has been solid. And adding another big-bodied receiver that has strong hands, who's quicker than what his size would show and could beat you as a big slot as well. Tet McMillan for the Vegas Raiders would be a perfect match for any quarterback that they end up getting. Could be Sam Darnold in free agency. Could be Marcus Mariota to come in and help a younger quarterback later in the draft. But Tet McMillan will help out any receiver or any quarterback in Las Vegas when the play time comes.
Mm.
And that brings us to the – what'd you say?
No, I say I 100% agree with you there. If they aren't going to get one of those quarterbacks, they definitely need to get another weapon for whoever it is that's filling in for their next year or two. I'm kind of leaning towards this could be the potential landing spot for Aaron Rodgers if he doesn't go to the Titans. I also think that there's even a hot shot chance that this might be the team that might land like Sam Darnold or something, just to have that 1 year. Maybe they go 2nd or 3rd round quarterback. I'm actually looking at Howard from Ohio State actually for Vegas in the 2nd round to even be potential guy to go for.
That guy's been screaming up draft boards, and I can understand why. Doing more work on him, I didn't really I wasn't too big on him when he was coming out of Ohio State. I thought he had just some of the best offensive linemen and receivers, but he looks, from doing more research on him, looks to be a stud in the making. And he's got the quarterback size, reminds me a lot of a Ben Roethlisberger type. Big, can move a little bit and everything, better when he's outside the pocket. So if that were the case, they get Tet McMillan and then Howard in the 2nd round, they could have a good offense for years to come. But now this takes us to my New York Jets. And Rich, I have my ideas of who I think the Jets would go with right now. But who do you think the Jets would end up picking if the board fell like this? Who do you think the Jets would go with?
I think if McMillan falls to the Jets, I think that is their play here.
Completely
if the board
agree.
Is shaping up like this, I can see the Jets trading back maybe with, let's see, I don't want to go too far back, maybe like the landing zone where the Niners are. I think that they could be the first team that could be taking Tyler Warren.
That's what a lot of fans have been pushing for since we passed up on Bowers last year, and you could see what he's doing with Vegas.
Yep.
So you think Warren's the pick at 7 for the Jets?
But I'm not going to actually go with that. If we're going to go with team needs and who I think is the best player for them right now, I think you go Mikael Williams here.
Ooh, edge rusher from Georgia.
It's going to shock a little bit, yes. But if you look at the resume here, Georgia pass rushers, if you just look at the Philadelphia Eagles roster, they are pro ready. Some of these smaller schools usually takes a year and a half probably to get them going. But I really think that Williams here is just the guy. I know they have Quinnen Williams. I'm trying to think whoever else is on.
Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald.
Yeah. They rotate in and out. So, maybe not the best third down pass rusher you're looking for, but I honestly think that, a little bit more pass rush would have helped them a little bit last year. Their defensive backs, I feel like they were playing a lot of catch up on there. If you look at, the pass interferences calls that were called constantly on the Jets last year, besides Sauce, I'm trying to think who the other cornerback was.
DJ Reed had a
last year. Yes. It was like every deep ball was always going to be pass interference. So I think, limiting the amount of time a quarterback has settled in the pocket, it's going to, create a little bit of havoc if they were to go that way. So if I see the board like this, and again, if McMillan was gone, I would definitely go with Malik Williams at that point.
And Williams is a solid pick. Like you said, Georgia edge rushers, or Georgia defensive linemen just in general, always seem pro ready.
Yep.
If it were me, if I was picking this one, Williams would be a choice, but we have a glaring need at multiple positions. Tight end, because if we don't re-sign Conklin, which I do think the Jets might do, so Tyler Warren wouldn't become that big of a need. We need defensive tackle. Our run defense last year was atrocious. Javon Kinlaw couldn't get out of his own way. Michael Clemens was a penalty machine. And you're putting it all on Will McDonald and Quinnen Williams, and those guys were double teamed every play. Like Quinnen Williams sometimes had 3 guys on him. To take pressure off of those guys, especially with Jermaine Johnson coming back, I think I would have gone with Mason Graham. I think he's the best player on the board right at that position at a position of need. So I might have went with him. But if you are nervous about Jermaine Johnson with his serious injury last year coming back, Williams could be a stud and come in as a nice placement for them and rotate them in and out. So Williams is a solid pick for the Jets at that one.
Yeah.
So going on to Carolina. So Williams went to the Jets. At this point, Carolina, I think, is sitting pretty. And I think the best thing that they could do is take the best player available, and that is Mason Graham.
Yep.
Never a bad problem taking defensive linemen. And Carolina's defense wasn't great last year. Their defensive line did get bullied a little bit after losing Brian Burns to the Giants, trading him away. So I think putting Mason Graham back on this team or bringing him to Carolina can solidify that defensive line. And the good thing about Mason Graham is, too, he can play over the nose. He can play the 3-tech. He can play as an edge. He can play everywhere on the defensive line. And honestly, I think Mason Graham would be a perfect fit in Carolina because they love to rotate their defensive linemen and put them in different positions. And he can be like a John Franklin Myers type of defensive player. And if you look how he did in Denver this past year, Mason Graham could be that guy and better. So Mason Graham going to Carolina, I think, would be a perfect fit.
Yeah, and I think with Derek Brown coming off of his knee injury last year, too, I think it's going to take a little bit of him getting back up to speed. So I think that, filling up the need with the best player available, I think he's probably number 3 on my big board if I had one. It's just obviously the need for the defensive tackle spot has been tapered off recently over the last few years. So I think that would be actually a really good pick for the Panthers.
All right, moving on to New Orleans. These guys have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
And there's been so many rumors about them with Derek Carr. We don't know what's going to happen to him. He could be a post-June 1st cut. Yep. So where do you think New Orleans falls?
So I think there's 2 guys that could go here. This could be another Tyler Warren drop-down spot. Rumor has it that they're probably getting rid of Taysom Hill.
Yep.
So the need there will be, again, for tight end. And I also see Jalen Walker here, or Jalen Walker. Just to change it up a little bit, let's do Tyler Warren for here.
Ooh,
They're gonna obviously need more weapons. Chris Olave is one more concussion away from being on Tua watch, as sad as it sounds. I honestly think that they're going to need more weapons for whoever it is going to be that they're going to bring in for quarterback, whether they're going to go with, Spencer Rattler for one more year, or if Derek Carr gets casualty and he gets tossed out, and then maybe bring in a Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones. It'll be kind of intriguing to see if they're finally going to start bringing in some younger talent, because it seems like the Saints are still playing off of the Drew Brees roster. So I think changing it up, getting that nice little fill-in piece there at tight end there for Warren, I think that would be their probably best option there. If not, they go defensive line. If Walker is available, or if I'm trying to think who I just picked for the Jets there.
You gave us Michael Williams.
Yeah. So if either of them are available, I could see them going that route. Yeah, so that's probably my two landing zones, at least for the Saints.
And I love where you're going with it with Tyler Warren there, because I think that could be a perfect spot for him, because especially for their new head coach, Kellen Moore. Yeah. I think Warren is the type of player that Kellen Moore wants. And a lot of people say that the tight end is a quarterback's best friend. And if you go with a younger quarterback later in this draft, Tyler Warren is the guy you want him to become best friends with. Tyler Warren, as a Penn State fan, is a monster. He could be the next Brock Bowers or somebody just like that. This kid is going to be really, really good in this league. And I think at this point too, I think this would be where I'd feel comfortable taking a tight end.
Yep.
And I think he would be solid for New Orleans.
Yeah, I honestly don't think he's leaving the top 10.
I don't either.
I think a lot of teams last year realized, oh great, this is how good Brock Bowers really is. And there was 3 or 4 teams in that top 10 last year that might have been a potential landing spot. And once they, Penix was taken away from the Raiders, and they ended up getting the steal out of that. So I think teams are going to start worrying a little bit more about the tight end position again. It's a valuable position in this league.
It really is, and it's becoming more and more popular, getting that nice safety blanket. And Tyler Warren can beat you in many different ways. He even threw a couple touchdown passes last year. So if you need an emergency quarterback,
I'm about to say they're going to replace Taysom Hill with a younger Taysom Hill.
Exactly.
And Taysom Hill was probably their best quarterback last year.
Oh my God, that team, man. The Saints could have been so good if Derek Carr stayed healthy. That team could have won the division. But Tampa Bay, I love Baker Mayfield.
Ain't that something? They still had a chance to win the division.
So next we get to Chicago. And Chicago needs so many different things. I'm honestly shocked they made it all the way down here to this pick with all the struggles they had. They got their quarterback of the future. They got a new head coach in Ben Johnson, who's an offensive genius. And what they desperately, desperately need is an offensive line. So if Kelvin Banks is there, that's going to be the guy. You need to be able to protect your young quarterback. And if you look back at Chicago games last year, that guy was running for his life on damn near every play. Yep. So getting a guy who can be a beast and a physical run blocker and pass blocker in Banks, I think this would make Williams so happy.
No, undoubtedly.
And that gets us to the next pick, San Francisco.
So the Niners, another weird team, the injury bug, obviously. You're going to have hopefully a healthy Brandon Ayuk back. Pearsall played pretty decent for, rookie showing coming off of his injury in the preseason last year. It's all about what's going on with Debo and Christian McCaffrey, though. Are they going to rely on Christian McCaffrey, especially seeing GT's there still? Are they maybe in pursuit of going running back? That is a possibility, but I don't think they're going to go, especially first round, because anybody seems like they could play for Kyle Shanahan at that position. So I'm actually going to go down a little bit. I honestly think that the Niners will be one of those teams that are going to trade back.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I honestly think they would trade back to probably somewhere in the back or maybe like round or pick 20-ish round range in that area in the first round. So I think the guy that they would draft may not be at this round or pick here at 11, but I would pick Josh Simmons, offensive lineman for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Ooh, that's a really good pick. I feel like Simmons is underrated. I think he's going to show a lot of people that he could be the top lineman in this when the combine comes. This kid is a monster, and Ohio State normally produces really solid offensive linemen. So I would love this pick for San Francisco.
Yeah, and they're definitely going to be in needs of offensive line too, I think, because like I said, they've been only so good for so long, and then once the injuries start creeping up on them, and the age and everything, they got to start looking towards that again. Otherwise, they'll be struggling for the next few years. So it's a good time to start looking, especially if they could trade back down to get some extra picks for that move.
And I think he'd fall too, because with the next guys coming up, the next team's coming up, I don't think they're desperately in need of offensive line. Maybe Cincinnati, but in all honesty, I don't think these teams would be looking for a lot of offensive line help.
Yeah.
And one of those teams coming up now, Dallas, man, they need a lot of help on defense, but Jerry Jones has been known to shock us. And one big need that they have is running back. And honestly, I feel like Ashton Genty would be their pick here, because Jerry Jones always loves to make that splash pick. And I wouldn't mind this for Dallas, because their running game last year was atrocious. And the thing that you can help out Dak with is by giving him a solid running back, because the carcass of Ezekiel Elliott last year, not great. You had, Rico Dowdle, I think his name was last year, as their running back. Never even heard of him until this past year.
Yeah.
Give them a guy like Ashton Genty, and I think you would have a really, really supreme running back for years to come. And this kid is a beast. People bounce off him when they go up against him or try to tackle him. So Genty, I think, would be a solid pick for Dallas, even though they need so much help on their defense.
Yep. No, agreed. I was kind of hoping that there would have been some kind of scenario where, GT wasn't going to fall back, but after you get past the 8th or 9th pick, maybe the Bears would be the first team really to look at him. But yeah, it would be a definitely no-brainer. But it would be funny to see, as typical Jerry fashion, when there is the guy there that the Cowboys want, if they finally then decide to go towards the second receiver option and a Luther Burden, just because that just despite the fans just a little bit, but get still a big playmaker.
Dude, they already spited the fans by hiring Schottenheimer as their head coach. You had so many options out there, and you go Brian Schottenheimer. No offense to him, because he was a solid offensive coordinator for the Jets once upon a time. But man, he is not a head coach. You could have gone Spagnuolo if you wanted to. Somebody who's has so many Super Bowl wins. You could have gone Matt Nagy if you wanted to stay on the offensive way. You could have gone so many different options. Hell, you could have hired Robert Saleh if you wanted to, if you wanted a puppet as a coach like Brian Schottenheimer will be. But man, this was a shocker. But I think Brian Schottenheimer would be happy with Johnson here.
Yeah. No, agreed.
So that brings us up to Miami at pick 13. What do you think they did?
I'm going here. Again, another team has a couple ways that they could go. Depending on what they're going to do with Tyreek Hill, this could be a nice spot for maybe a Luther Burden. But what I think here is they're going to go pass rusher, and I think they're going to go Jalen Walker here.
That is scary, because that could be really good.
Has had on-off again injuries. Every time he seems like he could get going, that's usually where an injury usually resides with him. They're definitely going to need help in the defensive end. Calais Campbell can only play so many years.
That is true.
So I honestly think that defensive lineman is going to be their top priority. If not, they might have to look back towards the defensive back spot, because Jalen Ramsey's getting up there in age. But I think best player available, besides the offensive tackle, which I don't think is one of their top needs. Didn't watch a lot of the Dolphins really So it's kind of hard for me to know what their offensive line situation was, but
Their offensive
definitely
line
think they
wasn't
go.
bad, but they could use some help up there.
Yeah, and I also think that they weren't getting the separation from their receivers as they were last year. Again, you got defenses knowing how to play against Tyreek Hill now, so a lot of it was just the check down stuff. So, again, I do also think that Tua has a tendency of holding the ball way too long as well, too. So, again, it's a little bit on each of their ends, but I think Walker is actually a decent pick for the Dolphins here.
Yeah, and Walker can play so many different positions. He could be your edge rusher. He could play weak side linebacker. You can bump him into the middle. He's a smaller linebacker, but has great coverage skills, and it can match up against any running back or any tight end and be able to cover them well. The only thing is he does tackle high, so he needs to get lower body strength and try to tackle low, because if he gets stood up by a lineman, he is done. But I think this could be a very good piece to the Miami Dolphins defense to help them. Great pick for them. I would hate that if I was watching the draft as a Jet fan.
Yeah, so you're seeing the surrounding casts for, that whole it's funny because that division right now is starting to play as how can we stop Josh Allen? Pass rushing.
It's basically that. Like,
yep.
Josh Allen is not just a quarterback. He's a running back. He is somebody who will run your ass over too. And it's so annoying to see this happen year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
And especially this past year with a team that we didn't think that was going to be that good, because their best receiver was Khalil Shakir and nobody knew what he was.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But Miami gets a steal here with Jalen Walker. And I think he does bump up. I think he's going to be a combine monster because his athletic ability is off the charts.
Yep.
But this brings us to Indianapolis. And I didn't really watch too much of Indianapolis this past year. I feel like their defense was pretty solid. It was Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco that really got them to a lot of trouble. And it doesn't seem like Indianapolis trusts Richardson as much. Their offensive line, I think, was okay, but I think you build on a strength right here, and I think you build that defense. Anthony Richardson can get things going with his arm and legs, and I think what the Colts do right here, and it might be a shocking pick, but I'm going to go with one of the best players still on the board, and I'm going to go Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia. I think if there was a weakness in their defense, I honestly think it was their safety play, because I think they had two solid cornerbacks playing for the Colts this past year. Their safeties were just out of position a ton of the time, but I think Malachi Starks could come in, be that thumper that you need, but also be that awesome coverage safety as well. And I think he comes in, starts right away, and makes an impact on that Colts defense.
No, I like it.
3 Georgia guys going up real quick in the first round. It's impressive. Georgia always makes so many good defensive players too.
I know. It's a new Alabama.
Well, you were saying similar to how the AFC East is trying to do anything they can to stop Josh Allen. I feel like it's the same with your division too, doing everything you can to stop Stroud. Even though Stroud had a down season this year, he's still the best quarterback in that division.
Yeah. And it's funny if you watch like the Colts, Jaguars, and Titans. I mean, I don't recommend anybody to watch any of those games if you don't have to, but it's turnovers. All 3 teams this year was just turnovers was killing them. Colts would lead down the field, and there would always be a red zone issue. Richardson just had struggle. He's even trying to, doing the, running the ball himself in there. There was fumbles, and it was just a mess for the Colts this year. So I don't blame them going on the defensive side to hopefully, help them out a little bit, creating their own turnovers.
And with Stark, you get that type of player. He really is somebody who reminds me a lot of what's the safety's name from Detroit, Brian Branch. This kid is a beast, and I think Starks comes in and changes the culture for that team because the kid's a leader, and I think he brings a physicality that was lacking on that Indianapolis Colts defense last year.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Atlanta. Where do you think Atlanta goes? They have their quarterback of the future. They have some good receivers. Where do you think they need to add?
So I think for the last 10 years now, it's been edge rusher, edge rusher, edge rusher for the Falcons. Are we in agreement on that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I think we're going to skip that again.
I think that's a good plan.
That they just don't ever go with. They've had many coaches now in the last few years. It's just not what they go with. And I think the Falcons were, again, okay quarterback play away from making the playoffs. And I think if they had decent quarterback play, they had a team that would be scary enough with all the weapons on their roster to make a run.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, AJ Terrell needs somebody else on his other side. They would be a team that's going to go best player available. Could you imagine Will Johnson with AJ Terrell?
Oh, that cornerback duo would be insane.
With Jesse Bates, you have Justin Simmons. That would be the next no-fly zone. So if I was the Falcons and if he was there, that would be my go-to. No matter who your edge rushers are, I think the potential is there that you could rush with 4, play back with them. You're going to have all the time in the world because no one's getting open. You give me Will Johnson on the Falcons here.
And that, I think they would love that. If Will Johnson does fall, a lot of Jets fans think he would go to pick 7. I honestly think teams will trade up for cornerback Will Johnson because the kid was a beast last year. Great in zone, but even better as a man cornerback, covering man. If he fell to the Falcons, and just like you said, with their defensive backs already, oh man, that would be a no-fly zone. Like you said, there would be nobody able to throw on them. And sorry.
No, that's why I think the Niners trading back, it would be one of those teams trading up to get Will Johnson.
Oh yeah, and him falling in this draft to that pick would be solid for them. And that leads us to Arizona. Now, I was banking on Will Johnson falling here. I think they need a solid cornerback, and that was the guy I was going to target.
Yep.
Edge rushers, I don't think they're that bad at. Their defense was the biggest struggle, but their offensive line was not great either. And I think what they are going to end up doing is going best lineman available at this time, and that is interior lineman, I believe. And I think Tyler Booker out of Alabama as guard is going to be the pick for Arizona here. I think they can't pass up. Kyler Murray's been getting killed the past couple of years. They need a line to protect him, and you got to start right next to the center. You got to build in closer to him. You got to get him a solid guard to help solidify that offensive line, because the kid's been getting killed. And there's even rumors that Kyler Murray might get traded this offseason, which would be insane.
No, I totally agree on that.
And heading into next, Cincinnati Bengals, pick 17. Where do you think they go?
If it's not on the defensive side, then what are we doing here? I mean, unless for some weird reason you are looking at the Luther Burden to pair him up, but I honestly think that the defense was the only reason that prevented them from going anywhere last year. At this point, I think the top 3 edge rushers, I kind of rate them all the same. So just for love of my Tennessee Volunteers, I'll just give them James Pierce here.
Fair enough. And I think, like you said, they need defense, especially if they're going to lose their best edge rusher this year, who, if they don't give him a contract extension, Trey Hendrickson, if they lose him, they need somebody.
Yeah.
So Pierce, I think, can be a solid day one starter at edge for them.
Everybody
heading into Seattle. Seattle needs a ton. Metcalf, their receiving core is solid, but there's rumors that Lockett's going to be a post June 1 cut.
Yeah.
So they could go Luther Burden. I honestly think they're not going to go receiver because if they do move on from Lockett, they do still have 2 solid receivers. Tight end wise, they could always need some help. Defensive wise, they could use some help. But I think at this pick, I think you got to help out Geno Smith even more. And I'm going to go offensive tackle Armand Membao. I think he's going to be someone who solidifies that right tackle spot for Seattle. I think he's going to move to the right side and be a stalwart on that side and somebody who can give Geno Smith some more protection so he's not getting cracked every play.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there were another team similar with like the Colts. They would drive down the field and then get to the red zone and just don't know what to do. They were just, if you watch the Bills Seahawks game this year, they were just manhandled up front the whole game. They just couldn't get anything going running wise. They were very inconsistent on the running attack. A lot of that had to do with Walker not being so healthy, but Charbonnet, he kind of, he made his own last year and stepped up pretty well actually for Walker when he filled in for him. But the offensive linemen, they need the pass protection definitely just to give them some time with those weapons that they have. So there's really no reason as for having JSN and DK Metcalf and even Tyler Lockett, like you said, all three of those receivers and not produce as much as they should have. I definitely think offensive tackle is a big need there for them.
Oh yeah. So moving on to Tampa Bay, what do you see them doing?
They're kind of weird as a sense of, I feel like they're actually a lot closer to being somewhat dangerous as what some people say. They drafted McMillan last year. I do think that receiver is probably their top need. Them an edge rusher, of course. Like everybody needs edge rushers though, and it's such a deep edge and wide receiver class. I could somewhat see them going again, another one of those teams, best player available. Chris Godwin probably isn't going to be back, probably, or even because I think he was a free agent coming up this year, right?
Yeah, he's a free agent this year.
Yeah, so he ain't going to bring him back after that terrible injury. I'd say, give Baker another weapon. We give him Luther Burden this time.
I love that pick for them. Giving Baker more weapons because you don't know what Mike Evans is going to be. He's getting older. Still a solid receiver, but doesn't have the burst like he used to. So giving them somebody younger who can give them explosiveness, Luther Burden, I think, is a solid option for them. And going on to Denver, they don't need too much. Honestly, what I think they do need is another weapon for Bo Nix. And the one thing he did not have, he had two solid receivers, but he did not have a tight end to throw to. And I think Colston Loveland would be the pick for them. I think that they would love getting Loveland. A big guy, can block, can make great catches, has some decent speed. I think this could be somebody who could be a safety net for Bo Nix, which he desperately needed last year.
Yep. Nope, totally agree there. And again, they're one or two players away on their offensive side from being very dangerous. I think Sean Payton's done a great job with that offense. He's gotten it to be, the New Orleans Saints junior roster, as it seems. And their defense was already stout beforehand. They were just waiting to get some kind of offensive production to be kind of relevant. So I think that would actually be a really nice pick for them.
And getting to Pittsburgh, who do you think they go with? They have some needs. They're going to be losing their two running backs. Najee Harris is a free agent this year. Their other running back is a free agent this year as well. They could use receiver. There's talks about Pickens might get traded because of his behavior. Where do you think Pittsburgh goes?
I think if Burden didn't go to the Buccaneers, I think that this would be like a good landing spot for him. With that being said, I'll give them Emeka Egbuka. They're going to need some kind of weapon for whoever it is that's playing quarterback on there. Pickens disappeared last year. He did have like the nagging injury at the end of the season, but they need somebody else on that roster. If you look at any production that they were getting out of the running back position, they had literally nothing else from the receivers end. So Justin Fields, as you could see when he was playing, he pretty much was running for his life at the beginning of the season just because they had nothing else going for him. So I think definitely giving them that offensive weapon needed there.
Oh, yeah, and I think I love Egbuka. He is the second best receiver in this draft to me behind McMillan. Yep. He is the best route runner. He can play in the slot, can play outside. He is somebody who is going to flash in this draft and in the NFL. I love him. And in Pittsburgh, if they finally get him a quarterback, because I don't think they bring back Justin Fields, and they already said they're not going to bring back Russell Wilson. I think if they bring in like a Sam Darnold to quarterback them, I think Egbuka could thrive under that.
Yeah. Nope. Totally agree.
And getting to the Chargers. Now, Chargers fans would be pissed because I think they'd want Egbuka, and Pittsburgh just stole him. And their biggest needs are on offense, really. They need a tight end. They need a wide receiver, running backs, interior offensive line, tackles. Defense was pretty solid for them this past year. So I don't think edge rusher, they will be losing Khalil Mack. So if you wanted to shore up that edge rushing, that could be solid. Mike Green could be picked here. Shamar Stewart. I think they do go defense. And the pick that I think goes there is Mike Green, the edge from Marshall.
Okay.
I think he fits that defense so much more. Is a good run stuffer, can get to the quarterback quick, can use his hands really well to get linemen off of him, has good bend. I think he ends up on the Chargers if this was how the board would fall.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely see that. I mean, the way that the draft went, literally the top needs on their roster all went in the last 3 picks. So I definitely think if the tight end there for Michigan, if he had fallen through, I think that definitely would have been a big need for them, a big spot for him to fall.
So going to Green Bay. There's a lot of rumors around Green Bay. What is going to happen with Jair Alexander? Is he going to get traded? Is he going to be a post-1 cut? What is going to happen with them? Their defense needs a lot of help. Their offensive line needs help. Running back. Where do you think Green Bay goes?
I do think that they go defensive back. I think there are probably 1 or 2 defensive plays from being, like I said, a top NFC contender. And they were last year. They just happened to be stuck in the toughest division in football, it seemed. I do like Morrison here from the Fighting Irish. He's a taller defensive back. Plays a little bit like a Jair Alexander. Defensive backs from Notre Dame lately have been also pretty decent. So, I think that would be the kind of way that they would go. Either him or Jahdae Barron, I have them very close on my board. So, but I would say we'll go with Benjamin Morrison here from Notre Dame.
Solid pick. If you can get somebody who's just like Jair Alexander, give you that same stuff without the attitude, I think it'd be a solid pick.
Yeah.
Now, getting into Minnesota, their defensive line was all right. Flores had that defense playing lights out last year, but there's always benefits of getting more help on that defense. Could they go Walter Nolan out of Mississippi? Could they go safety route? Could they go another edge rusher? In all honesty, I think they go defensive line. Build up that bulk on the defensive line. So Walter Nolan, I think, fits really well in the Brian Flores type of defense.
Yeah, totally agree. God, that defense was so good last year.
It was. In all actuality, I wanted Brian Flores as the Jets head coach. I'm really happy with Aaron Glenn, but in the offseason before we hired a coach, I was all over Brian Flores, and I wanted Dimitroff as the GM, but I'm so happy with Muji and AG and bringing in Rick Spielman. I think our front office has changed completely, but I digress. Getting into Houston, where did they go?
So, offensive line, no doubt. I think that there would be one of the teams that might trade up for like a Josh Simmons in the first round, just because they need something to protect them with Shad. They got their receivers taken care of. Hopefully Tank Dell comes back from injury, playing in his elite status that he was. Stephon Diggs should be back and be healthy. So, again, weapons-wise, I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Stephon Diggs is a free agent.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He did come off the so, damn. I mean, now you want me looking at receivers here, but I still don't think that that's where they would go. Looking at the draft board and what's left.
Do you want me to get you to interior offensive line or tackle?
I got it here. It's either Josh Connerly from Oregon unless they want to go interior lineman, then I think Donovan Jackson. I think we're gonna go. We'll give them Donovan Jackson.
Interior offensive line.
Yeah. I honestly think that had the Texans had an okay offensive line, I honestly think that they would have given the Chiefs the run for their money. But having absolutely no line, you had no chance against them in Arrowhead there. So I honestly think that that's the only move that they have is getting one of those lineman areas fixed on that roster.
I completely agree. And now the Rams come up. This is an interesting one because you don't know. Do they trade Stafford? Because there's rumors that the Giants trade for Stafford. Yep. Do they keep him? And if they do you just continue to build on that offensive line? They already said they want to get rid of Cooper Kupp as well. So do you go receiver? This team is going to be really interesting. It really matters of what happens in the offseason with this team, of where they go in the draft. But as it stands now, if they were to keep everything, Cooper Kupp not going away, Matt Stafford still being on the team, I honestly think tackle would be their best position to go for.
Yep.
And that's why I'm going to take Josh Cornerly Jr. from Oregon.
Yep. Good.
Because you need to build up that offensive line. If there was any issue with that team, it was the tackle play. And I think by bringing him in to the Rams, I think you help out Stafford so much.
Yep. No, totally agree with you.
Now getting into Baltimore. Like Baltimore's pissed that Cornerly just left because they need tackle play too.
Man. So what are we gonna do here with them? They're always popular for top player available. Offensive tackle, I think, is a need, but I think later on in the draft they could kind of take care of that. Wide receiver, I do think that they probably do need at least one more weapon. But again, you can probably trade back and get somebody decent in the middle of the second, even later in the third. I think that they have to go cornerback here.
Okay.
So you have a Jade Barron, you have Siobhan Revel Jr. We'll just give him the Texas defensive back. Let's go Jade Barron. I think you got to have defensive backs that can hold up with the offensive weapons against your Bengals, your the Chiefs with Worthy, and when Rashid Rice comes back. So the contend in that conference, you got to have defensive backs that can cover.
Yeah, and their defensive backs last year, Hamilton had some good games, but let them down at safety a little bit. They got torched a ton of times.
Yep.
If they weren't winning right away, they got torched on defense. And I think cornerback could really help them out. Yep. And leading into Detroit now, if this is how the board fell, their biggest need right now is defensive edge. Yep. With what's his name? Who went down? Hutchinson went down this past year. You need somebody to come in and help fill that void you have. And if this was how the board fell and Shamar Stewart was still there, you gotta go with him. And I'm taking him right away.
Yep. As I was looking at the board, I was like, wow, if the Lions were sitting there with either Shamar Stewart or Walter Nolan, I would just be in shock for them. It's like Chris was coming early for them.
Exactly. If it could fall that way, I think they'd be so happy.
Yep. It just shows how deep that this draft is on defensive line.
Defensive tackle, defensive edge, so deep. Offense needs some work. The receiving core, I think, is deep as well. Mm-hmm. But, man, the defensive line in this draft, and linebackers too. There's some linebackers I'm shocked haven't gone yet.
Yep.
But it's just how the board has fallen, and we bring it up to the Washington Commanders.
So they could go the route of wide receiver. I do think that they can't just rely on Terry McLaurin. It obviously showed that in the playoffs in the last couple of weeks of the regular season, actually. When teams were going up against them, they started focusing on McLaurin more so towards the end of the season, and you noticed a little bit of taping off with it. So I think going receiver would probably be their best bet, but I'm going to say that they're going to go after Jack Sawyer, though. I think that they need a perennial pass rusher that could kind of, help out the rest of that defense. And I think that Jack Sawyer is actually very underrated. I think he could even be a guy that somebody reaches up for it later, or even like more in the mid round of the first round draft picks. I could see him kind of going up as high as that. So I honestly think that that's one of their key things that they need. Obviously, is pass rushing. I think that would be a decent pick for them.
That's a good pick. Ohio State edge rushers, defensive players in general from Ohio State always do well in the NFL.
Yep.
They do have a great program down there. And it's Jack Sawyer is such an underrated edge rusher. I really like him. I love the film that he shows, a leader on that team. I believe he was captain this past year as well.
Yep.
The kid's a beast and such a great locker room guy. His teammates loved him. That gives me the Buffalo Bills, and they really need help on the defensive side. Their run defense wasn't great this past year. They were a bend but don't break type of defense. And if this is how the board fell and they see Kenneth Grant there, who is a monster as well, I think they'd be jumping up and down for joy. Kenneth Grant goes to Buffalo.
Yep.
So now we get to Kansas City. Who do you think Kansas City goes with?
I think we both watched the Super Bowl and we saw the reasons why they lost, right?
Oh, yeah. That offensive line was bad.
So I'm going to go with Cam Williams from the Longhorns.
Okay.
He could play right tackle. He did give up he did have a little bit of an issue at the beginning of the season last year, but seemed like he cleared it up a little bit. He only has 1 year of starting experience, so I mean, it's going to take him a little bit to mold in there, but I can see him being a solid right tackle for them. Andy Reid's not going to put a player in there with for no apparent reason with any kind of like skill or anything. So I think he's going to kind of develop them into that. So yeah, I do think that that's obviously the need for the Chiefs. I don't really think that there's really much of anything else that really needs to be needed besides offense or interior lineman, maybe tight end for to replace Kelsey, but definitely gotta go all line there for the Chiefs.
Oh yeah, that was with all their games, Pat Mahomes was getting killed. That offensive line could not protect him no matter what. No, even trying to build through that offensive line by bringing in some studs. They're going to be losing more offensive linemen. Trey Smith is a free agent. You don't know what's going to happen with him if they bring him back. But there's so many ways. The offensive line needs to be reworked in Kansas City. And I love that pick for them. And that leaves me the honor of picking for our Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles. And with everything that I've seen, one of the biggest things that they need, I don't think it's on offense at all. I think they're going to go best player available at this point. And I disagree with some of the best players available on this board because there's a player right there that I'm looking at from Alabama that could come into this linebacker core and be a beast, and that's Jihad Campbell. And I think if the Eagles got him, I think they would be so happy with that because this team was so good overall at this. And I think that if they get Jihad Campbell, they would be so excited about it.
Yeah, and I just saw a report. Zach Bond is also undecided on what to do too. So they're gonna have a need at linebacker. And obviously, there's nothing that they struck gold with their defensive backs last year in the draft. Their defensive line is probably one of the greatest front four I've probably seen in the last 15 years. Linebacker is the only weakness on that defense, if there really even is one. And I think Jihad Campbell is definitely the right pick for them.
Oh, yeah. And in all actuality, too, the Eagles don't need much. They were somebody who did a lot of great things in the offseason. Howie Roseman is a solid GM. He can make do with anything. And I think if they got Jihad Campbell, that would just be such a blessing for them. Building up that linebacker core. If Bond doesn't come back, you got a young stud coming right in Alabama. always has stud linebackers. So I'm excited about what that happens, what they do with that.
I would think if they don't go Jahad Campbell, if one of those receivers is the fall, I could see them kind of trading up even for that. The injury risk that AJ Brown and Devontae Smith kind of show every year, they usually miss a couple games each. I could see them going that route, getting another receiver. But hell, when Roseman is GMing for two teams at this point in his career, I'm sure Calvin Ridley could be on the trade block for them at some point next year if needed.
Honestly, they could. That team, Howie Roseman, no matter what he does, he always hits on the players. Yep. I was laughing last year when they were drafting. They were becoming the Philadelphia Bulldogs with all the Georgia players they were taking. Yeah. It was insanity. But guys, that is the end of our first round mock draft. If you think Rich and I did a good job, please let us know down in the comments. If you think there would be things you would change, comment down below. We're always happy to hear what you guys have to say. And Rich, thank you so much for joining me on the Jets Ward tonight. Where can our fans find you at, buddy?
So you can find me on both Facebook and YouTube, FishBowl Fantasy Sports. Again, I usually do weekly live stream on Facebook and on YouTube. But yeah, that's where you can pretty much find us. I also hop around on Jets Ward too, commenting and stuff. So I'm always there to interact with anybody who likes to talk sports. So, but thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. You are always welcome on this channel, bud. I'm hoping to have you more often. We can do more drafts and everything. We can talk about fantasy. Off season's coming up with free agency. I'm looking forward to talking to you more. But guys, make sure you subscribe to Rich's channel. He does a lot of great work on there. If you are into fantasy football or any fantasy sports, please listen to him on his channel. He does a wonderful job. I will be putting his link down in the description below for this video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to both our channels. And again, thank you for joining us in the JETS Jets Ward. Have a great night, guys, and thank you again.